worked money, organizations, the soccer club, the baseball, associations, the lacrosse, variety of that. There was social media posts. There was also a public, information meeting at the library in, I want to say
March or April.
March or April. So,
and I'll say that's not for a project like this that's on a constrained time frame. It's not an uncommon comment, right? But we're glad you're here now, and hopefully you can stay engaged. And importantly, this is the beginning, right, of a 10-year period to roll out the plan, and this is a tool to help guide engagement over the next 10 years. So we're glad you're here now.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, ma'am. That's all right.
Right on the website for the township so that my husband can find it.
Yes.
Yes, I believe it is.
There's a news flash for it. If he clicks on it there, the link's there. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sharon. You are screen sharing.
Okay, let me see if it's working. I think.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for your patience.
He's on vacation.
So like I was saying, we looked at a number of documents, looked at past capital improvement plans, looked at park assessments, past surveys, the Kiwanis Park Focus Group report, which I do want to recognize the heroic effort of some of the folks in your community that put forward a really, I think, fantastic study of what could happen and gave us a lot of inspiration for where we could go with the study. Some things that we learned from our analysis. Shaler has higher middle-aged and senior populations when we compare that against the county and the state. And I'll say too that Allegheny County at large has generally an older population. So median resident age in Shaler is older, and that has impacts on recreation, right, and what's provided within the parks. Population is projected to slightly decrease, which is also following the trends at the county level. And we also looked at market indices. These are proprietary reports that look at the likelihood of people to participate in certain sport activities. And things that ranked highly were golf, pickleball, and softball. Nature-based and adventure activities like fishing and kayaking ranked very highly, as did interest in wellness and exercise. Level of service, as I mentioned, is comparing the population against the number of facilities that are in a community. So, I'm making this up, one baseball diamond to 1,000 people, right? That's a general tool and just one data point that we use. But there is an organization called the National Recreation and Parks Association that publishes a benchmark report on an annual basis that allows communities like Shaler to benchmark against peers and understand how the level of service stacks up. And what we find is that generally the facilities, right, how many basketball courts, how many baseball fields, Shaler is in line with their national peers, but low on park acreage. And what that means is that parks are just full of facilities. Think of where you might go to fly a kite or toss a frisbee that's not the outfield of a baseball diamond. There really aren't that many spaces that are unprogrammed space. And the impact of that means if we want to add new things, it means we might have to take stuff out of those parks. And so that's the next comment, is parks are maximized. We looked at a gap assessment. This is how many people live within 10 minutes or a quarter mile of a park. And it's just under half of residents in Shaler. And that's exacerbated by the topography and the lack of sidewalk infrastructure. So that number may be even lower. When we looked at the conditions of the parks are very well maintained. They have a good standard baseline of facilities and amenities. Some of them show evidence of aging. And there's definitely opportunities to make these parks accessible to those who may not be fully able, to make them what's called ADA accessible. Those are national guidelines for accessibility in parks. And there's definitely opportunity to invest there. And there's also limited connectivity between parks and adjacent neighborhoods, again, exacerbated by lack of sidewalk infrastructure and the topography. Some of these parks are in places that are kind of more isolated. From a programming and operations standpoint, the lion's share of the programming in the community is provided by the Shaler North Hills Library, and they do a fantastic job of it. However, they are running out of space and have limited capacity within their structure and have logistical issues around things like parking because they share their parking with the school. There is an opportunity for the township to lead some of these programs that are more recreational in focus. And right now, a lot of these programs that are provided by the library are at no cost because they're to the greater county. If new programs were to be introduced here in the township, there's the opportunity for cost recovery or potentially investing in small fees to cover the operations costs of those programs. Right now, there is no dedicated Parks and Recreation director. In fact, Park and Recreation is a division of DPW, so there is no Parks and Rec department. And the staff are shared amongst DPW and Parks and Recreation. And there's opportunities to standardize some of the policies and procedures that would improve the consistency in programming, operations, and maintenance for the system. For our engagement, we did, as Judy mentioned, 6 focus groups with organizations that are engaged with recreation throughout the community. We had an online survey that was open for 12 weeks, and we had an open house. What we heard from residents was a desire to modernize aging facilities, expand the trail network, add comfort amenities like permanent restrooms, seating, shade, create more inclusive and multi-generational spaces. Excuse me, that goes back to the ADA accessibility that I mentioned. Maximize the multi-use potential of parks given the limited space. We're going to talk more about that. And there continues to be an interest in a dog park in Shaler. We're not going to talk much more about a dog park because what I'll say is that they're difficult to execute given the amount of due diligence and liability that needs to go into how those things are managed and maintained. When a dog bites someone, who's getting the phone call? Those are the types of things and due diligence that really need to happen prior to the implementation of a dog park. Additional feedback was improving visual consistency across parks and public awareness of park offerings and youth sports. There's a desire for coordination amongst the library, the school district, and local organizations. And we heard importantly that, especially as we start to talk about the recreation center, we heard a desire to make sure that we're investing in what Shaler has now and make sure that that works alongside investing in new amenities to make sure that we're not pulling back on the level of service to the parks and facilities that you guys do have. We heard that there's support for a right-sized community center, quote unquote, which is functional, flexible, and financially sustainable, that doesn't create duplication. But the question remains, what is that right-sized facility for Shaler? And we're going to talk about that at the end. So that's the analysis phase. I'm going to keep moving here. Like Judy said, we want to make sure folks have time left in their evenings. So now we're getting into the first part of the project, the Parks and Recreation Plan. And the plan is structured like this. There's a framework, which includes a vision, mission, and guiding principles. Those identified goals. To execute those goals, there's a series of strategies we're going to walk through, and then specific actions the township can be taking. And all these things work together. The mission was drawn heavily from the work that the Kiwanis Park Focus Group had done. We thought there was a lot of applicability there, and that is to provide quality recreational facilities, parks, programs, which are safe, diverse, sustainable, and enriching to the community through our commitment to public service. With the vision being that Shaler Township Parks and Recreation Program will create a lifetime of memorable experiences for residents and visitors. So from that, we were able to pull out guiding principles. This is kind of the filter that we go through in looking at decision-making, making sure that we're creating parks that are safe, that they're enriching, meaning that they have opportunities, a variety of opportunities in recreation, that they're sustainable, meaning not just that they're good to the planet, but that these are things that can proceed in perpetuity and that it's not a loss leader on costs, right? So that if it takes cost to run these things, that there's an adequate consideration of those costs and implementing those changes. And diverse, making sure that these programs are, these parks are open to the full range of park users. Would you mind, I don't want to.
Last time we touched it, it broke, Chris.
What's that?
Last time we touched it, it broke.
I know, all right.
Best I can
We won't
do.
do anything else.
I'm not doing
Here we
anything
go.
else.
So here are the 5 goals that guide this Parks and Recreation Plan. Over the next 10 years, the township will preserve and enhance existing park assets, Ensure parks and facilities remain adaptable, relevant, and responsive to evolving community needs. Enhance and expand community program offerings, formalize and strengthen parks operations, and elevate Kiwanis Park as the township's signature gathering space. So with that, we'll move into a section that focuses specifically on park improvements. Now, this does not necessarily include all parks, but it includes highlights of some of the bigger nuggets within the improvement plan. So I'll start with the strategies. These are kind of agnostic of any one park. And these are tools to implement those goals. So one strategy could be the use of multi-use facilities. So when we talk about not having a lot of open space within the parks, a lot of that is because there's duplication of paved surfaces that may be able to be combined where it makes sense. So in examples like this, are there opportunities to pull together court sports like deck hockey and tennis and basketball into ways that reduce the footprint and allow for more open space within the parks, more green space? Adding accessibility and comfort. So this goes back to the ADA accessibility that we talked about. Investing in this will directly allow for an increased usership from all ability levels. So things like paved pathways, ramps where they need them, seating, shade, things that allow people to stay in the parks for a longer amount of time and feel comfortable doing so. Expanded programming use of parks. So we heard that the library has a number of programs that they operate. They're running out of space within their facility. They're just one partner that caused us to say, can we look for opportunities for those partners to program out the parks and use space within the park so they can truly be social spaces within the community? So an example like this on the left is an outdoor classroom. You can see seating, and in this case, they got a chalkboard. In the top right, use of some of that green space that we're recovering to have outdoor programs like fitness and yoga. And then branding, wayfinding, and signage. So when you're in a Shaler Park, knowing that you're in a Shaler Park, investing in things like benches, but not just any benches, but benches that look like they belong together and are consistent from one park to the next, that show a high level of care and intention within the parks. And the last one is trails and connections. So we heard a lot of desire around expanded trails here in Shaler. And I'll say from a couple of standpoints, this achieves a couple of the goals. First is it provides new recreation opportunities. It creates connections and access to spaces that may not be accessible prior. But also, when we looked at trail mileage across this region, Shaler and your peers have about 2 trail miles total. And so by investing in trails, that's one area where Shaler could have a little bit of a leg up amongst some of your peer communities and having more trail miles. What's important about that is, you saw the declining population. People think about parks when they make their decisions about where they want to live. Having a trail network that provides access to a lot of the civic destinations could be a deciding, one of those factors that could help make Shaler a desirable location when folks are looking for where to live and stay. We're going to move now into specific actions, specific projects. And what I'll say is these projects, we need the last part of the plan that has not been put together yet is to prioritize these along a short, medium, and long-term horizon. So you're seeing the full list here of what some of those concepts are. One being around creating connectivity within the township center. And so you can kind of see hiding behind our video screen up here is where Shaler North Hills Library is, right next to Shaler Area Middle School. And there's maybe an opportunity to create a safe, connected walk here to Kiwanis Park. I can say from the time that I've been working on this project here in Shaler, I've seen a number of kids walking along Wetzel there in a somewhat dangerous fashion. So creating a space where people could, kids could get out of middle school and walk to the park seems like some low-hanging fruit. From there, City Hall, or not City Hall, Township Hall, Municipal Hall, is on that same route. And it also struck our team too that Eagle Canyon Trail, which is a really beautiful trail, is only a quarter mile down the way from Kiwanis Park. It's actually less than that. So could there be an opportunity to create a further trail connection, connect into Eagle Canyon Trail, and then be able to go all the way from Fawcett Fields up to the library on a safe, protected pathway?
You hit the little minus sign in the corner, it should just minimize it without.
And the last time we did that, it broke, so I'm
Never
not
mind,
doing it
never
again.
mind.
Can we just click on the
Don't
screen?
do
I'm not
that.
doing it again, RJ.
Just kidding.
There we go.
That's
All right.
it. I'm doing that again.
Ellen Hughes. This park is in the northwest corner. In fact, it's the very corner. Those are the other municipalities there between Ross, McCandless, and Hampton. The recommendations in this park, there is a ball field in there, but it's very buried back into the park. It backs up against people's residences. And so in recouping some of that green space we were talking about, this shows removing the ball diamond in lieu and creating an open space with a small pavilion, expanding parking, creating accessibility upgrades. And, you know, from this, if you've walked this park, you know that there's a trail back there that people use under the overhead lines that's currently unpaved. And so there may be an opportunity to pave that. Right now, it's in a utility easement where the overhead lines are. But there could be an agreement reached with the utility company to be able to pave that. Additionally, this presents an opportunity for a truly multi-municipal trail, something that could connect Ross, Shaler, and Hampton, because all those are public properties that back up to the Four Corners area here. And from a grant standpoint, multi-municipal is very attractive to DCNR because it's quite difficult to do. So if this is something that could be pulled off, you know, that might be competitive from that standpoint. Farrell Field, this is in the southeast corner of Shaler. In this diagram, we're showing improving the parking circulation, which is that gray P. Combining the current basketball and deck hockey into one court, which is that orange E, creating a new open space there that would then be between an upgraded playground and that multi-use court, as well as creating some seating in the hillside there for spectators who may be watching a ball game and creating an accessible walk from the parking lot down to the ball field. Richter Park, this one's also quite nestled within a neighborhood, but it's quite active when you get multiple baseball games going at the same time. And so there's a desire here to expand and formalize the parking so that is a little more maintained. And again, this is another example where we can shrink maybe that double court down into a single court, which right now I believe is tennis or basketball and deck hockey, into a single court to make some additional room for other uses in the park. We also heard that there's a paper street back up behind here that people use as a trail. So maybe another opportunity to create a circuit trail within a park. Stone Ridge and Upper Fall Run Park. Right now, the two parks touch, but there's not a connected trail that runs through them. So this shows an opportunity to connect the two and allow people using, you know, who may be either parked or walking to Stone Ridge to be able to access Fall Run Park. It's also showing a shelter, a new small shelter in Upper Fall Run. And on to Kiwanis. So this was where we spent a lot of our time. You can see there's the master plan is actually on the board up there. There's a number of things here from our assessment that we saw as opportunities for improvement. I will say it's a challenging site given its terrain. I mean, there's a lot of, I see the focus groups saying, yeah, it's a tough site. And so some of the things we saw there, some opportunities are to realign the entrance. Right now, it's somewhat of an unsafe entrance up at Wetzel. Incorporate the Jeffrey School site into Kiwanis. I mean, it's readily apparent that there's a lot of kind of quirky movements with the parking lot right now because there used to be a building there. Remove some of the drives, try to recapture some of that open space. Activate some of the underutilized area, which is where E is. That's where the old, I'm told, Girl Scout camp was, and help spread some of the activity out because right now it's so concentrated up by the pool that there may be an opportunity to use the full site. So here is, if we flip over, this is the master plan. I know not everybody's used to reading plans, so if you have questions about what's what, I can either answer them here or we can point at the board later. But we're going to zoom into these red boxes, a north enlargement, a south enlargement. So for the north side here, I wonder if I can point.
No.
I can point, it's just not going to work on the screen. So if we start from the top left, this proposes realigning that entrance and bringing that drive and grading it smoothly down into the site. Nothing too steep. It shows a new structure kind of nestled into the top left over there. That would be in addition to the shelter that's behind Crawshaw Field. What we hear right now is that Crawshaw, that is a difficult pavilion because if there's a ball game going on, you're going to end up sharing your food with somebody who's been playing baseball. So by putting a duplicate kind of further out of the way, it mitigates some of that conflict. Adding some parking there so we can increase the parking, because that is one thing that we heard is that parking is always kind of a challenge when the park is really humming. Eliminating some of the duplicative drives. So right, there used to be, there is currently a drive directly north of Crawshaw Field that's shown removed here. So the circulation would go through the parking lot that's on top of the hill, come back down, and in the bottom right, that is the existing parking lot reconfigured for additional parking spaces so that there's more capacity closer to the pool. And we're also showing in this moving the basketball from its current location in the bottom right up into the open space where there used to be a small playground that's since been removed. But by doing that, we've got more open space over by the playground. So those activities over there can expand a little bit without infringing on some of the other things happening in that area. And if we move south, the bathhouse is currently being replaced. And we are also showing reconstruction of the tennis and pickleball courts into 2 combo courts. Right now, if you guys play tennis up there, you know that there's a pretty precipitous drop between the 2 courts. This would seek to eliminate that so it's safer, more accessible. And right now there is some cracking that's happening as well. So this shows pulling that back from the edge. So there's maybe not as much slope stability issue and more longevity in the construction. For next year, these are the 2026 priorities and actions that have been identified, is to add programmed locks to bathrooms and Ricker to enhance the signage and add the same locks to Denny. Vienna Woods, which is a parklet, very small park, add an entrance sign, turn that basketball court into a multi-purpose court. So that can be a proof of concept. Dust Park, improve the entrance aesthetic. Right now, there's some chain link that can be removed. Install a small pavilion. And then in Fall Run, there's currently a grant that is underway. What is the timeline on that grant, Julie?
We're hoping to bid it in spring of 26
Got it.
with
And that,
construction to start in the summer.
got it. So that includes enhanced parking, restrooms, and a pavilion. So that's the Parks and Rec, or the capital improvement side. Let me check my time, see how I'm doing here. So, okay, so about half an hour in. The next part of this is programming and operations. This is the stuff that you may not see out in front as much, but is very much a priority from a Parks and Recreation Plan standpoint to make sure that the township can continue to improve its service. And so we're going to run through probably about 5 slides here for recommendations on things that, again, may not be front and center, but are important policies that the township can invest in. So from an operations standpoint, strengthening policy systems management tools to improve park and rec operations, things like defining consistent policies and standards, tracking costs and using performance benchmark data. So looking at neighbors over time to set some of the cost, building a volunteer program or continuing to enhance the volunteer program with onboarding and training tools, modernizing registration and management system to make programs easier to access, right? So all those things are back of house things that can help improve operations. From a programming standpoint, continue to offer a diverse mix of programs that serve residents of all ages, interests, and abilities. Again, the library does a fantastic job of this. But looking for year-round programs, things that may be seasonal, looking for spaces to be able to operate those year-round. Pursuing pop-up events to test new ideas. This goes back to the idea of bringing some of those programs from partners into the park and using surveys and attendance data to refresh offerings each season. So regular touch points that residents can provide input to help shape the programs that may happen throughout the year. Continue collaboration with the library in offering complementary programming and co-branded activities. Again, the library has been a great partner to the township in offering those programs. Cost recovery. Currently, the programs offered by the library, because they are open to the county, are generally at no cost. If new things are to come on board, this is part of the sustainable principle that we talked about. There may need to be consideration of opportunities to recover some of that cost. Maybe not 100%, maybe some of it's subsidized, but that's a decision, a philosophy the township can make. But things like setting cost recovery goals for programs and facilities, introducing tiered resident and non-resident pricing, expanding dynamic pricing and bundled program options, and diversifying revenue through options like rentals, sponsorships, and memberships. These are all tools that the township could use to help expand some of the programming options. Staff development, build the capacity and leadership to manage a growing Parks and Rec system. One of the recommendations here is to hire a full-time Parks and Rec director and stand up a dedicated staff with maintenance to meet the future demands. That would include supporting staff development through state associations and continued ed, and staying engaged with peer communities to share best practices and innovation. And then on the engagement front, strengthen visibility, outreach, and community partnerships to keep everyone engaged. So refreshing the branding, visuals, social media, clearly communicating program value and opportunities in township material, recognizing and celebrating volunteers, and maintaining open feedback channels through surveys and public updates. So this goes to your question, ma'am, about how to get engaged. There will be some enhanced opportunities coming out of this plan. And to wrap up the first segment here, this all wraps up under the vision and mission: to provide quality recreational facilities, parks, and programs which are safe, diverse, sustainable, and enriching to the community through our commitment to public service, with the vision that in 10 years, the Shaler Township Parks and Recreation Program will have created a lifetime of memorable experiences for residents and visitors. So that's the first half. Like I said, 2 parts. So we're going to keep moving unless anyone has a burning question that can be answered in 30 seconds or less. I'll keep on moving. You guys are all here for the rec center. All right. So rec center feasibility study. Let me lay out the process here that we went through. So the maroon should be seen really as the outer rings or the inputs to our feasibility study. And before I go too much further, what I'll say here is, what is at the culmination of this study is a feasible option, but it's really up to, it's not a you should or you should not, right? This is an attempt to provide the necessary information for your community to make decisions around what you feel like is right for your community. So the model we went through here starts with physical conditions. That's analysis of Kiwanis Park. It's a difficult site. There's limitations on what can happen within it. Functional needs. Those are things like, who are we trying to target with this facility? What are the desired programs? What are the service goals? And finally, the financial resources. So what's the capital capacity? What are the funding mechanisms? Those things all come together and we synthesize them to understand, is this facility creating the impact that we want to see, right? Is this accessible to the community? Is it providing the level of service that we want? From a physical and financial standpoint, is it feasible to construct? Is it something, is the final dollar value for this something that is palatable? And functional and financial leads us to operations. You've heard me talk about operations in the previous section. Hopefully you weren't too tired of it, because I'm going to continue to talk about it in this section, because operations is critically important to running a facility this tight. I think a lot of times there's a lot of attention put on the initial construction value, but it's really the operations which is the long-term staying power for a facility this tight to be successful. All those things combined reach what we would consider something that is feasible. So within that master plan, I'm not going to run through all the analysis that we did for the site, but ultimately we determined that the western side of the site, where the Jeffrey School was, where the softball diamond is, was the most feasible area to consider construction of a new facility. And we went through a number of iterations. I'll say the initial scheme that we pulled out was a 38,000 square foot center, and it delivered on the bulk of what the community was looking for in a facility. It included multi-purpose rooms for programs, a warming kitchen to bring in catering. It included event and banquet space, similar to what you might see at Blueberry Hill for weddings, covered outdoor meeting space, a gym with 2 courts and a walking track, as well as all the support facilities like a locker room, an office, elevators, stairs, all those things. Now, when we went through this, we got to the point of looking at staffing impacts. This facility would require staffing load at 2.5 times the current staff you currently have here in Shaler. So we're talking about at least 6 full-time equivalents. And that means that because they're full-time equivalents and how that scheduling works, that means that could actually be a staff closer to 10 or 12 with some people working part-time, which is a significant load operationally for a community that is operating out of a division of DPW without a standalone department. From the site standpoint, it would require the removal of 2 baseball diamonds. It would require paving pretty much all the open space that's available to try to park it. And even then, given the scale of the facility, we projected that you would never be able to fully activate that facility because it would always be in conflict with other things happening in the park. So if you have a baseball game happening, that would be in conflict with the ability to program other aspects of that facility. So you're really sort of starting from a deficit for a facility of that size. So we refined that to a facility of 28,000. We looked at how to really scale this down, but keep a lot of the programming intact. So that's reducing the square footage of the multipurpose room, reducing the square footage of the event and banquet space, reducing the gym to a single court. And the impacts there are we still have the conflicts with other programs, other facilities. And importantly, it maintains the same staffing level. We don't actually reduce any of the staff numbers because the model for a rec center is self-guided recreation, which means you need to have staff on hand to be able to manage that facility when people are in it. And so what it ends up being is a less efficient model. And so from an operational standpoint, it's less efficient than if you had just the full-sized facility, neither one of which you would ever be able to fully activate. So we went to a little bit of a shift here. We went from a recreation center model, which balances active and self-directed recreation. So that's, you do have programs and events that people can come in, but you also importantly have member-driven activity where they can come in unscheduled and use the gym, walk the track. We switched to a program center model, which means that about 70% of the time, 70% of the spaces in the facility are programmed. That's more efficient with the use of staff time, right? So if the space is going to be filled, you have a staff member there. If it's not filled, you don't have a staff member because it's not open. And so it really revolves around facilitated program. Now that you could still have open gym time, but that would be kind of considered a program that you would program around. So here is the finalized scheme. We're going to zoom in a little bit on this, but you can see that it fits within the master plan for the larger site. If we zoom in a little bit here, you can see the community center there, and there's 2 blue arrows, one on the north and one on the south. This is situated into the sledding hill. If you guys know where that is, it's got about a 25 to 30 foot drop between where the Jeffrey School site is and the softball. And so this would be embedded into the hillside in such a way that the upper floor, which would have a multi-purpose meeting room and outdoor covered meeting space, would be accessible from above. And then the lower level would be what's called a multi-athletic center. So it'd be like a soft surface, flexible fitness space where you could do fitness activities. You could do pickleball, tennis, volleyball, basketball, but it's all flexible and divisible so that you can have fitness classes on one side, shooting basketball on the other. But it would all be programmed, and that would be accessible from the lower parking lot. So you've kind of got two accessible levels. And then inside you'd have obviously an elevator and stairs. From a consideration standpoint here, this would require removal of one of the baseball diamonds or the softball diamond. You do keep more open space than what some of the previous options looked at. The staffing levels we're going to walk through, you'll see are at a more feasible level. And the scale of this facility is not such that you couldn't fully activate it. You'd still have to, I think, plan the impacts here, but it's much more feasible than the larger facility we were looking at. The intent would be that, yes, the lower level would have a walking track. Yeah, it wouldn't be a long one because it's going around essentially one gym size. But at least at the feasibility level where we are right now, yeah. Yeah, I know you can't see this very well, my apologies, but we did look at the occupant load. So how many people are we actually talking about fitting in this facility? So for the multi-purpose rooms, we've got two columns. One is planned capacity, which is more of a generous spacing, and then max capacity, which is if you were to go by code and the fire marshal were to come and count people, that's the maximum number of people you could have. And so for the upper floors, the multi-purpose room, you're somewhere between probably, I think, what does it say, 200 to 350 people. So it's not necessarily a small space. And the outdoor meeting room would be between 60 and 100. And then the multi-athletic court below would be about 175 people. So all told, if you were to fully activate this facility, you'd have probably between 450 and 650 people in the facility at any one time. Now, cost. Estimated project cost, plus or minus $17 million. I know that's what people are probably here waiting to see. What that includes is a two-story facility, 20,000 square feet, and the parking lot. And it includes a number of other items that add cost here. So there's a 25% design contingency. I'm going to talk about that in a second. The necessary professional fees, the general conditions. So this is a project cost, not construction. Construction is just the dollar value to build it. This includes all the soft costs that would go alongside, as I was saying to someone earlier, soup to nuts. But I do also want to point out this diagram to the left. This is a cost estimating horizon, and I wish it was out there more because I think it hopefully helps people understand where cost estimating is. I think a lot of people would see this and say, okay, I'm ready. Sign on the dotted line, $17 million. We're done. But the reality is we're at the far left of this diagram, which you can see is estimated accuracy on the y-axis, amount of project definition on the x-axis. We're at the point where we're just trying to figure out what's in the box right now. We have not decided structural systems. We haven't decided facade material. All those things come over time. And as you do, the amount of definition gets less and less so that by the time you go out to bid, there's maybe a 5% fluctuation in price. Where we're at right now, we're closer to order magnitude. There's potentially a 100% swing in this dollar value. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to get a facility that's 100% more than what this is, but it is to say that there's decisions that have to be made all the way through this process to maintain the cost that's as shown here. And it's early days, and there's a lot of decisions to be made where potentially the cost could come down from this, right? But this is an order of magnitude to be able to just understand what does this look like at this point in the study. Okay, a few more things on operations. I promised you to talk about it a little bit more. These are the four key spaces: the multi-athletic court, the multi-purpose room, the outdoor meeting spaces, the warming kitchen. We had a consultant on this project, Pros Consulting, who specializes in operations and programming. They've helped pull together this operational model. And they have this is just a sketch of the potential programs that could happen in those spaces. Which then gets us to understanding, I expect everybody to fully read this diagram here. But what it is a table that shows the age groups against the different spaces and programs that would be put in this facility to make sure that this facility is programmed and can be programmed in a way that meets the desired user groups within the facility based off of age and there's alignment with the guiding principles. So based off of those two, this is how a staffing model was reached. And so within this, it's a much more realistic or much more manageable, I should say, 1.5 to 4 full-time equivalent. Keep in mind the other facilities we were talking about 6 minimum. This is between 1.5 and 4. And from an operational expenses standpoint, over a 5-year horizon, to operate the facility is probably somewhere in the 250 to, if I'm rounding here, $325,000 or $350,000 annually. Now that's just the operating expenses. There are cost recovery tools that could be employed, things like passes and daily admissions. So if there is an open gym time, having something like that, programs and events, reservations and rentals, sponsorships. One thing I want to point out here is we heard through the study how important it was that this facility be for residents of Shaler and not a rental hall that takes up your prime park, right? And so that's where, the reservations and rentals is a tool that could be used. But I think based off the study that we've conducted here, I wouldn't anticipate that it's only reservations and rentals. So that there are programs and opportunities for residents to come and use this facility because it's a Shaler facility. Those targets of what's feasible and what the cost recovery are can be set, but are not included in this diagram. So next steps, we are importantly, some pieces we have to do on our end is prioritize the components that we shared with you on the park improvement end. Finalize the report. It'll be available online for review. So keep your eyes on the township communication, and this will be presented to the Board of Commissioners probably early next year. So how did I do on time today? I got there kind of 45 minutes-ish, pretty close. Good job. Any comments from you guys before we open up for discussion?
No, thank you. Thank you for all you've done.
Questions? I know there's a lot of information there. Yes, ma'am.
Can you please explain what the staffing requirements would be for the facility? I was envisioning that, say I teach yoga, I could rent out the area and have class. Or, residents could come and use the bank facility if they had a party. They could rent that out. So I understand the need for a Parks and Rec director and maybe an assistant to process all that, reservations, etc. But what specific staffing positions? You mentioned 4 people. Are they people that would be physically at the facility or?
Where is it? You have a slide, yeah. Can you go back to this guy? Yeah. So I know you probably are not able to read this. But what's on here and what'll be in the report is the staffing for the preferred alternative or the final iteration would include a recreation manager, right? Who would run daily operations, programming and scheduling for the facility. At the lower staff count, it would include custodial, right? Keeping the facility maintained. The instructors would probably be part-time or contract. So if you want to say have a yoga fitness, that wouldn't necessarily be a township employee. That would be somebody who provides those and would rent the facility for their class. But it would be a recreation program because it has health and fitness engaged. And then maintenance and facility support would probably be as needed from the existing staff that the township has currently. The higher end, if this really gets activated, would also include a halftime administrative support, which could be covered by existing staff. And, maybe you do have some programming individuals that are on staff as opposed to contract for class by class. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Yep. More questions? Yes, Sharon.
When you, the staffing model, I thought we talked a little bit about hours open.
We did have that. I didn't put it in here because I was trying to condense, but I believe the hours open for this model is around 63 hours on a weekly basis. And I apologize that I don't have that in front of me, but we do have the hours developed that would be open 7 days a week for certain hours. Yeah.
I think that brings an understanding of staff.
Understood. Yep. Yes, sir.
The existing pool work in your considerations? It looks like you didn't really touch it at all. It was a separate entity within this whole project.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at, I think the Kiwanis Park Focus Group had some really innovative ideas around how to combine like the bathhouse with the rec center, and so the funds would be used in a way that could service both. As we got deeper into the study, we really couldn't find a feasible way to combine those two, given some of the access needs for that facility. So right now, there will be some recommendations around positioning for larger investments into the pool, because it's going to need some upgrades in time.
Did you consider maybe downsizing the pool and kind of moving it inside a structure that gives it year-round use?
That is something that was talked about, excluded early, given the significant costs to that. I mean, it's well above and beyond, I think, what was in the realm of what we were talking about as a feasible option.
For example, Peters Township considered an indoor aquatic center. And they opened the bids, I believe, 2 years ago. And the bids for an indoor aquatic center that just basically was an indoor pool that allowed programming was $19 million. So Peters Township rejected the bids, and they actually just put in just a spray park. They did not, they've scrapped the idea of an indoor pool. And that's just for comparison purposes, just for information. But
Yeah,
I've heard they have one heck of a splash pad.
I think they do, yeah.
But I guess that's what's concerning to me is that, it's a feasibility study, and yet it seems like that was just carved out, too costly. So we're not gonna look at it.
Understood, yeah. More questions? Yes, sir.
The rental of the hall, you said for Shaler residents, does that include booster groups through the school district? Would they be allowed to use it? Because currently they don't rent it for fire halls. So you have to take your banquets and things outside the township. Would this allow them to bring it here and keep it in Shaler?
I mean, I think that's a philosophical, yeah, it's probably a philosophical management question for.
My response on that is most likely, now that would be a policies and procedures that the board would have to approve, but one of the attractive things about a community center is giving residents a place to go and a place to do things instead of having to rent at Hampton Community Center or having to rent at North Park. So I do think that would be taken into account and consideration. We would like to keep the groups, the Shaler groups, Shaler area groups in the area, in the communities.
Even if, the fire hall can revise their, approval listings to allow a booster group to rent out a fire hall for a fundraiser. It doesn't have to be this community center if the fire halls would, through the township, revise that role as well.
They don't, so the fire departments are totally independent of the township and we have no jurisdiction over that. But so if you're having a baseball association banquet dinner, you can't rent a fire hall? I didn't know that.
If you're having a fundraiser, they will not rent to you because they explain it as if you're having a wedding, you know who's coming to the wedding but if it's a fundraiser, you don't know who's coming and you can't control that person if there was damage. So they will not rent the booster groups for fundraisers.
I did not know that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
With your downsize, the third option you have, was there still gonna be a kitchen in that facility?
A warming, yeah, and it wouldn't be a full commercial kitchen. It would be a space that caterers could come in, warm things up, and then service events. But yes, that's still in there. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Please expand on the pedestrian walkway from the middle school / library to Kiwanis Park. I know there's plans to place sidewalks on the upper part, Wetzel Road. Is there would this require any other additional work to? I know on Mount Royal, there's not really any clear walkways. What would be the extent of the pathway there?
Additional study required, I think, is the cop-out answer. I mean, the reality is it's a vision right now of things that hopefully could happen over the next 10 years. We know that there's some challenges around some of the ownership of that property, but that's my 2 cents. I don't know if you've got anything
The-
to.
the- There's a lot of obstacles with that. First of all, Mount Royal Boulevard is PennDOT controlled. They have a very limited cartway in terms of the access. The township surveyed the 10 residents from Mount Royal Boulevard down to Kiwanis Park, Meyer Road. And we had an informational meeting and I've had correspondence with them. One of the biggest problems with that area is the utility poles are exactly 4 feet off the curb. Okay, so then to add another 4 feet on that for the sidewalks, those residents would be losing 8 feet of their front yard. Okay, now on some of those, in some of those properties, 8 feet is okay, you know, I could do that. There are some that 8 feet will put kids within probably 6 feet of the front door. So the residents came out and I spoke with 9 out of the 10, and they were very much against that. They had a lot of concerns, and one of the biggest concerns is losing their front yard. But other than that, state law states that the township puts in the sidewalks, but after that, the homeowner is responsible for maintenance, replacement, and also liability of those sidewalks. So that is a huge drawback. And, you know, the luck of the draw is 20% of the residents, 23% of the residents in Shaler Township. So 23% of 10 homeowners are senior citizens up there. And they're worried about that. They don't want the financial burden of that. But that is the way the state law is right now. So there's a lot of difficulties, I will say, with so much of this. So I look at this as Shaler Township is a very well built out community. Okay, we didn't have the luxury like many of our neighbors do. So for example, Hampton Township has this vast area that they could develop their park in. Franklin Park is like that. We were very built out when we decided that parks and recreation were important. And that's one of the challenges that has been difficult for OHM and for us. So for example, Kiwanis Park, and how many acres is Kiwanis Park? 23, 21?
26, I believe.
26. And only 52% of Kiwanis Park is buildable. 52%. And the problem is the terrain over there. So that is challenging when you're losing 50% of your park to anything that you can do over there. It's very challenging. And I will, Kiwanis Park is a beautiful park and there's a lot of amenities over there, but I would challenge anybody that I think there's actually more users in Fall Run Park than there are in Kiwanis Park. It's a different type of facility. But I think Fall Run Park is probably our heavily used, most used park in the entire system.
It's like, I think the online chat is asking us to repeat the questions when we ask them because they're not necessarily able to hear them. So make sure we do that.
Okay.
There's a question about
So there's a question about Richter Park on how do you plan on keeping people on the proposed trail and out of private property? So one of the biggest problems that we have, and I've actually put some money in the budget for next year, is to try to start surveying our parks. Because we have a general idea where the property lines are, but it's not really clear to all of us. So I would like to start surveying the parks. And that is a problem with infringement from people that think that they can go anywhere. You know, I struggle with Ellen Hughes Park. There is that utility right away with Duquesne Light. And I believe in my heart of hearts, they're going to have a really hard time giving us a right of way under a highly charged and electric line because they don't want the liability. They don't want to put people on a trail under that if something happens. So that is an insurmountable issue for us. So I don't have the answer on how we're going to plan on keeping people out. One of the things that I don't like to see in all of our parks is all the chain link fence.
Yeah.
It's not attractive. It doesn't make the park attractive. So we're trying to actually try and make them more aesthetically pleasing and a little more approachable for people. Joe, the foreman, and I are tackling that one little park at a time, but man, there's a lot of chain link fence in this township. So really, we're really restricted in this, in that we have defined parks that we really have nowhere to go with a lot of ideas. And that's one of the things that is challenging for township board and management of how do you do everything? How do you accomplish everything you want to accomplish and with the limited space that you have? So that is difficult. I mean, I've looked at these and we're trying to budget little by little, but how do you do it? How do you do it?
And not raise tax.
Right, right. So I just want to give some information out there. I had a bond council run some numbers for us back in 2022, which the interest rates really haven't changed drastically since 2022. This was when the focus group was looking at a concept over there. And a $12 million debt is about $625,000 a year for 20 years. So I'm doing simple math here. If I take 12 million and 7 million, so 19.5 million, if we had to borrow 19.5 million, the debt service on that would be about $1 million a year for 20 years. Our total township general fund budget is about 17 million. So $1 million is about, it's 1 mil of tax revenue brings in $1.7 million to the township. So if you have the debt service, and then if you have the operational cost, so $1 million debt service, and then on the high end, $350 a year in maintenance cost, okay? And then you always have to put money away for heating and air conditioning and roofs and everything else that tends to break in a building. So you're looking at probably a $1.7 million commitment just for a community center between debt service and operational cost. Now, the average home in Shaler Township residential, when I take the county analysis, the average home is assessed at $134,000. So a mill tax to $134,000 is $134 spread out over the course of the year. But, you know, I've been here a long time, and a lot of times I'll try and help Aaron, the tax collector, and I'll collect some tax bills. And I have been here a long time, and I can remember when the tax bills were like $281, $285, and I take them now, and they're a lot of money, you know, $700, $800. So it as the elected officials and as administrative staff, we try to balance what the community can afford. And that is a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance.
Are you looking to have the township finance the whole thing? Or are you looking at any outside money or grants or even a public outreach of the community as voluntary contributions?
We would seek grants, we would seek sponsorships. So one of the things, and maybe Chris can speak to this, one of the things that's challenging to Shaler Township is, so for example, if you've ever passed Cranberry Township, and I believe that park, maybe RJ knows this, that big soccer complex used to be sponsored by Dick's, and now is it UPMC?
I don't know about Cranberry, but I know that there have been some UPMC sponsorships for smaller projects recently.
And that gets visibility located right along the turnpike and right along 19. One of the problems here is visibility. They're only doing that for the bang for the buck. They're only doing it because people see their name on something. And I just am not sure that would be viable. So one of our biggest sponsors of Light Up Night is UPMC. And they've been a sponsor for probably 7 or 8 years. They cut their sponsorship in half this year because they've got budgetary concerns. So I see that across the board as people are really cutting back, but there are grants out there and we would pursue the grants. The issue is you can't count on grants. If you get them, that's great. If you don't get them, that's great. I will tell you, we do not have the funds to front a $17 million construction. It would have to be a bond issue.
Only thing that I'll add to that from the cost estimating standpoint, I don't have the magic bullet on sponsorships, but I will say, and just add the caveat, that the construction market is pretty volatile right now, both between labor and materials. We're seeing it across our other projects that tariff costs are impacting constructability, labor costs, availability of labor. There's a shortage. So, you know, we've seen that when COVID happened, I mean, some of our prices were really, I mean, just bonkers. They were really out there and a lot of projects stopped because they couldn't afford the new price to build. I think there's a lot of unsettled dust for what that's going to look like. And so again, moving forward, it's just, there's risk there and it's worth noting to make sure you can manage the risk.
I think one thing that we can add to that, and you're talking cost and feasibility, we as the township were expecting our bathhouse to cost $1.5 million, and it's at $2.3 million just for the bathhouse.
The construction is 2.2090. I can't even, the architect's fees and the site development and things like that. I mean, I cringe when I see it. It was needed. It was necessary. It had reached the end of its life cycle. But I will tell you that was a substantial undertaking for the pool. That facility has no HVAC in it whatsoever. The only thing that's mechanical over there is the hot water. I can't even imagine what adding HVAC and whatnot to that building would have been. Probably about $500,000. So.
I have one question I could probably take here, which is the trees behind the neighbor homes for Kiwanis Park. Will that impede the view of the park? The answer there is the intent was to provide buffer from the parking and goings-ons of the park to the neighbors. However, if that's something that is not desired, I don't see why that has to be there. So only if you want to, I guess is the answer. Sir.
Talk a little bit more about some of the pros and cons of establishing a Parks and Rec department. Like, what are some of the needs not being met through the current DPW model? I imagine there'd be a separate set of costs with setting up a new administrative structure. So how do you kind of think about that balance thing?
That's a great question, and admittedly, it's one that our sub-consultant would be best qualified to answer, who's not here. But what I can say is that yes, I can. Sorry. The question was the pros and cons of setting up a Parks and Recreation department as opposed to its current model of being a division within DPW. And like I said, our sub-consultant would be best qualified. We can follow up and make sure that that question gets answered. But I will say that some of the things that I think, as we talk about fitness programs and things that the township could undertake, some of that I think would be requiring a broader structure than what there is currently, because right now you correct me if I'm wrong, but the majority of the time really is around maintaining parks, and there's not as much or really any staff internally dedicated to programs other than what's happening at the pool and the larger events that you guys throw.
Our Parks and Recreation Department is fairly well taxed with everything that they have going on. So for example, on the weekends, we have shelter rentals at Kiwanis, we have shelter rentals at Denny, and we have shelter rentals at Fall Run. So, you know, the Parks and Recreation staff comes in on Saturday morning and Sunday morning to do all the trash and clean the restrooms. Now, we put prefabbed rooms down at Fawcett Field, so they have to go down there and clean that. And we're going to be putting prefab restrooms down at Fall Run. So that's gonna add more responsibilities to Parks and Recreation. If you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will throw trash. If you build it, they will use the restrooms. So, I mean, that is a logistic nightmare that we're gonna have to tackle in the next year or two with how do we balance this with basically a four full-time employee Parks and Recreation staff that not only has to cut the grass in all the parks, they also have to do facility maintenance. Our building and maintenance man is back there as well. They have to winterize everything. They have to shut everything down. They have to fix plumbing problems and things like that. They have to fix the pool when something goes awry over there. So there's a lot of logistics with four full-time employees that shift to snow removal efforts in the winter months. And we're gonna have to figure that out. I know that's a nightmare that we're gonna have to face. And there was a question earlier about why do you have to staff the facility? Well, we have to staff it to ensure that, so let's say, for example, there's a pickup basketball game in there. We just can't leave the facility open and let them, somebody has to be there. So first of all, if a commode clogs, that somebody's there to clean, to address it. Also, if there's damage, if someone gets hurt. So that's why it's important to have staff there, because you just can't let it open and have people in the facility. You have to worry about all kinds of things that can happen.
Something I'll add to that is, there will still need to be intention around scheduling that facility, right? So if there's something happening at the pool and there's a meet and the parking capacity is not there, that needs to be considered in programming that new facility, because otherwise you're really gonna have a hard time with, say, 350 people showing up for something at that community center. So that's, I wouldn't, again, I talked about operations, I'll continue to, that's an important consideration of what's gonna make that, function, I'm losing my words, that facility functional.
Well, and I think that kind of a nice way to put a bow on it ultimately, by the way, sorry, hi for those of you that can't see behind the boards, but I am sitting back here. I think ultimately, if there are staff that can really focus on that, is not somebody trying to juggle a bunch of different specialties,
Just-
is a master of none, as they say. So having dedicated staff that can focus on improving programs, sponsorships, employee training, learning new things from peers, those are all the reasons that you really want that fast.
Right now, our current parks and staff is Judy Cordig, Mel and Amanda. They all have numerous other jobs that they are doing efficiently well, I might add. And we have Light Up Night coming up in 2 weeks and this week, yeah, the end of this week. So they've done a fantastic job in doing that, in getting sponsorship, but Judy's going to be retiring. So who's going to carry that ball? And Mel and Amanda have been promoted to their own separate divisions within the township. It's finance and administrative services. We're running out of people. So
We need more people.
One of the things that I found interesting, and I did a lot of preliminary work for the focus group, and there's several members here of the focus group that can attest to that. And we looked at, because we always, and I think Pines Recreation Center is absolutely stunning. It's probably one of the prettiest in Allegheny County. They have weddings there, they have showers there, they have a fitness facility. It is very, very robust. Well, so a little bit about Pine. They took a loan out to build the rec center, but they had enough money that they were able to pay it off. And still, as robust as Pine Township is, they still lose about $125,000 a year on the operations of that. Okay, so there's Pine Township. Hampton Township had debt service on their community center, and they staff that, but they lose money as well. McCandless does not have a community center. Ross Township built their municipal building into their community center. And I've asked Ross Township for their numbers on their community center, and they don't break it out, which is frustrating to me. So, you know, they count their gas bill as their municipal building operation, where I would like to see how much the rec center is actually costing. But I will tell you, Pine Township probably has a staff of about 35 full-time and part-timers running that center. Ross Township has a Parks and Recreation director, as well as part-time staff running their events. Hampton also has probably 15 staff members.
To like community events and.
Oh, they have two community
recreation and
events
then
thing.
part-time.
So there's a lot of logistics of if you build a community center, how do you make it operational? And there's costs associated with that. It's not a bad thing. It's just what can the community afford? And I think that's where our due diligence needs to be done on this before before one decision is made or another. But I researched, I can't even tell you, probably 12 communities, trying to get the information. It's like the pool. The pool never makes money. It's a 3-month-a-year operation and we always lose. Sometimes we lose a lot of money on it, depending on what happens over there.
Weather.
But operationally, it does not break even at all, I'd love to be in a warmer climate. And then, also, and I don't know if people know this or not, so we contribute a substantial amount of money to the operational cost of the Shaler North Hills Library. Your budget's about 1.3 million, Sharon, am I right?
Correct.
Okay, the township contributes $500,000 a year to help offset the library cost, okay? So that when you take that into account of supporting the library to the 500, and their programming is phenomenal. I have to laugh when Parks and Recreation, when you get a new employee on Parks and Recreation and they get sent up to the library to do something, they go, what the heck do they do in here? There's people in and out of here constantly. But that place is the hustle and bustle, and the numbers are astonishing what they do there. But we also support that. We support that to the tune of $500,000. We also pay the insurance. It's our building. We also are responsible for when the roof leaks, I hope not, when the HVAC goes down, the elevator project, the restroom project. Now, they've done some fundraising to help offset that. Sharon is very actively seeking grants and gets that. But the bottom line is we are responsible for that building. Through the kindness of the Shaler Area School District, we don't own the parking lot in the back of the library. That is a lease that the school district gives to us. And it has a few covenants in it, but without that parking lot, the library would really be up a creek, We put 35 spots in the front several years ago, trying to help them, but they're always squished for parking too. And that's a problem for Sharon. I'd love to have a bigger community room up there because you could use it. There's so many things. I said when we had our focus group, one of the Zoom meetings, oh, I know, it was your orientation, your staff orientation or your staff meeting. I said, I'd love to get a crane on that library and drop it into a 5-acre spot and put an addition on it and have more programming and things like that, more parking. But we're dealt a deck of cards that isn't always the best hand, is what I'll say there.
It seems to me like this is definitely going to be a lot of money. And based on my limited knowledge, I would think that it's not something that this township right now can afford, quite honestly, without going to the residents and asking everyone to chip in so much money or to raise taxes. So is this something that would be presented to the township as a referendum on a voting ballot to say, do you want to, do you vote, yes to increasing the millage for the township by 2 million.
So
Something like that.
it's not subject to a referendum. If the elected officials voted to do that, then it would be imposed on the residents. What I will say after working here for 37 years is I do believe the elected officials truly listen to the residents. So one of the things that, and I try to do better at this, but sometimes I'm just struggling with time. But one of the things that I think is important is meetings like this and education like this. I assure you, if I had a show of hands in this room, how many people knew that the township subsidized the North Hills Library, Charlotte North Hills Library? Probably very few, okay? So I believe in education because I believe, and oh, we love you, Sharon, I'm sorry. I believe in education and I think that we need to educate residents, okay? So one of the things I just said to the staff is I want to do coffee with a manager over the budget. And they told me the only reason that would work is if I did it at Acrospire or somewhere where there was food, because it's not the greatest subject, but I think that education is the key. And once you are educated, and where your tax dollars go. So one of the numbers I just ran today, because I read an article and I thought this was interesting. So the average homeowner in Shaler Township, and I'm sorry, I'm dragging on here, Chris. The average homeowner in Shaler Township pays $461 in property tax, okay? So there's no sacred ground in here right now tonight. So when I take the public safety budget, which is the police department, strictly police, not the fire, not EMS. When I take the police department and divide it by the number of residential households in this township, the number was, it costs $462 per household for our police department, okay? So 100% of the property tax, 100% of our property tax is earmarked for public safety. Not faulting them, they're essential. It's fantastic. So I did the same number for public works. And we had a little debate because I think snow removal efforts need to be in there. And the number when I throw snow removal efforts with public works, and there's a lot that goes into public works. It's $502 per household for public works. So when our budget is probably 52% property tax and 46% earned income, those two are pretty even. But when you have the fixed cost of public works and you have the fixed cost of public safety, then your resources are very, very limited. And, Parks and Recreation is key to me. And, I've been, I'm just, I go to the board and say, we need to do this and things like that. So it is a balancing act, as you say, of balancing revenues and expenditures. So before anything would be done, I guarantee you there would be I call it a dog and pony show to as many community groups as possible, just to answer questions like this. Sharon?
That's $42 a
Good job.
Good,
There you
and
go.
it's a fantastic, the library is amazing. We enjoy our partnership with them. They're great. We enjoy our partnership with the Shaler Area School District. There's a key person in the back room and he struggles with the same thing that we struggle with in terms of that balancing act. I think everyone in this room, including myself, when I opened my county property tax bill last year, about had a heart attack. I was like, what kind of increase is this? It was a 37%. It was a hit, so that's a concern. It's a concern. I'm not being Debbie Downer. I'm not trying to skew this, but I want to present the facts as they are. So we have a question. Is there any consideration in the township plan for a lacrosse football field? We have a lot of baseball fields and soccer fields, but nothing in the public space dedicating to the growing sport of lacrosse for both boys and girls. We're limited to school district fields is the option. I'll let you answer that, Chris.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have a lacrosse field identified specifically within the plan, but we do have a lot of open space. I mean, that's why this is a big driver, is so we can have the flexibility for programs like this. So when I look at, for example, Farrow Field, maybe there's the opportunity to look at, that's probably the largest area you have that's unprogrammed next to maybe Denny, where you could look at or trying to put in a field of that type. But that's the choice that's kind of left, given that all the parks are maximized and there's not really any leftover open space. So
The next question is, would it be a more feasible undertaking to learn more into the proposed ideas of outdoor classrooms and spaces, existing library program and pool programming, possibly enhanced with a recreation director or additional part-time employee coordinating, integrating these programs and building on them? So we have, I will say, in the last 4 or 5 years, we have really tried to build on that. We bring the library into the parks. They do many presentations down there. We have really tried to expand on programming. Again, with all outdoor spaces, we are really restricted with weather. The weather is really, I'm ready to put garage doors on the party deck.
Happen to do any and all things, as you can see I'd be perfect.
I am not leading fitness classes.
the last thing that I'll say, I know we're coming up on time, and so maybe we need to wrap. But I want to thank everybody here. I don't know if that's my role or your role, but I'll thank you, and then maybe she'll thank you again. But I really appreciate the engagement, the opportunity to work with your community. And what I'll say is that the reason that we presented the Parks and Rec plan, apart from the rec center study, is that Parks and Recreation plan needs to and is designed to stand on its own 2 feet, regardless of the decision on the recreation center. Those goals still remain relevant, right? Those are still things that the township can be working on and delivering value that aren't necessarily tied up in the decision on the rec center. So with that, I guess I'll say they're 2 separate pieces. There's still a discussion to be made, but hopefully the Parks and Rec plan is going to give you guys a good guide for the next 10 years.
And so what we're going, well, you have to do this. Oh God, what do you call it? The
A
study.
statistically valid survey. Okay,
Okay.
so you want me to talk?
Would you explain that, please?
Yeah, so within our scope, there is one last piece after this plan gets done called the statistically valid survey. It's a science survey, a lot of math involved. And it's going to be conducted by a partner, not by us. But what it is it's a sampling, a representative sample of residents within the county, or excuse me, within the township. And with a community of this size, I believe there's somewhere between 300 and 500 responses that are required in order to get what's considered a representative sample to reach a certain level of confidence in any given answer. So after this plan is done, there will be a survey that's released. Not everybody is going to get the survey that makes its way into the actual count, but everybody will have access to the survey. So you can take the survey, but only certain ones are going to be counted. Excuse me, that came out wrong. Counted as the statistically valid, they will all be considered. But what that's going to do is using statistics will give a sample of representative of what the community feels based off of demographics, based off of location, based off of a number of different factors. So that's going to be issued next year after this plan is done, and will involve some of the harder questions, I think, more important questions around desire to fund some of these pieces. We haven't written that survey yet, but.
So one of the things that we thought was pretty impressive when we originally bought the Jeffrey School site, we did a survey, and it was quite a lengthy survey. It had a lot of information into it, but I think we had over 1,200 responses, which is unheard of.
Yeah, 1,700.
Oh, we had 1,700?
It was
It's
huge.
been a while. So, and the survey results were quite interesting to me. It was very much split 50-50. It was very much split 50-50 on a community center, not a community center, membership fees, not membership fees, increasing taxes, not increasing taxes. So that was interesting. And I will say one of the things that OHM was really impressed with was the number of results from that survey, because that was roughly 10%, 10 to 15% of the households in the community. So that was great. That was great that we got that feedback. We know that you're really sick of surveys. We understand that. But it speaks to your question, ma'am, of, it's an education process. you know, you wouldn't go in and just buy a car with whatever the guy told you the sticker price was and not knowing what the warranty was and not knowing what options were on it and not knowing how much fuel it used. You wouldn't do that, okay? And I don't think that's a prudent thing for the community to do either. We need to know all the facts. We need to know, you know, we don't need to know how many bolts are in the car, but we certainly need to know how many seats are in the car. And we need to know how fast it'll go and things like that. So it will be an education process. You're not gonna see a footer dug for a community center by the spring of next year. It's truly, everyone needs to be aware of what it means. So, I welcome anybody, that's listening. I welcome anybody here to email me, stop into the township building, stop and see me. There's a few members of the focus group here and they know how, I love to share information and, you know, tell what I know, because I've done this a long time. So, you're welcome to stop in. Don't hesitate to pick up the phone. Don't hesitate to email me. I want to thank the commissioners. I want to thank all the staff members that came here. I want to thank you for giving of your time to attend tonight. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Good night. Have a safe evening.
That's it. You have another thing. You have the last thank you.
I met you once. You probably don't remember.
Oh, yeah? Okay.